I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. And I'd like to also share with you the idea that it's such a pleasure seeing the city and the federal government fight over who's going to clean up the Gowanus Canal more quickly. So I thank you.
That's story right there.
The Gowanus Canal is a canal in the New York City borough of Brooklyn, geographically on the westernmost portion of Long Island. Connected to Gowanus Bay in Upper New York Bay, the canal borders on the neighborhoods of Red Hook and South Brooklyn to the west and Park Slope to the east. Likewise, Gowanus Bay borders the neighborhoods of Red Hook to the north and Sunset Park to its south. The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, recently announced that the Gowanus Canal has been nominated as a Superfund site. The Superfund is a federally funded program that identifies and cleans up the most highly polluted sites throughout the country.
In sort of mid to end April, started to see on the email blast that this was happening, that the EPA wanted to designate the Gowanus Canal as a Superfund site and put it on the national priorities list. We were thrilled and excited about it.
I see a canoe coming by with two canoes in. I wouldn't be on that canoe. I have no idea what would happen if for some reason or other I got in contact with that water for any length of time.
There's a condom right there. Oh, gross, yeah.
We are in the midst of a 90-day comment period with the EPA ending July 8th. Go to superfundgowanus.org. We want everyone to make comments on the EPA site, telling personal stories, adding photographs, or just saying, I want the canal cleaned up. You don't have to live in the Gowanus area to do this. You just have to believe that the canal needs to be cleaned.
So go to www.superfundgowanus.org and do two things. Sign the petition, which is going to go to our elected officials so that they know how their constituents feel, and get the correct addresses either by regular mail or email to personally give your opinion and send as much information, photos, whatever, to the EPA so that the EPA, who is counting votes during this 90-day comment period and really looking at how people feel, know that you want them to clean up the Gowanus.
My name is Linda Mariano from FROG, Friends and Residents of the Greater Gowanus. I live around the corner, right close by on President Street near Bond. Lived here since 1974-ish. The Superfund nomination is a blessing, an absolute blessing. We have FROG has advocated for clean water, clean land for many years now. And for the federal EPA to step in and say we are ready to go is the best news we've heard in a long time. We have been battling city, state, local governments, local politicians, local developers for way too long. It is time to actually get down to business.
The Flushing Tunnel was supposed to have been completed last year. The original timeline was finished in 2008. The city decided they had bigger priorities after originally funding it. They pulled the funds out from under it and walked away from it, which leaves us feeling like the city has never really extended themselves to doing any environmental cleanup in this area, and they've been putting delay after delay after delay now for more than 30 years to taking any steps forward to address the water quality issues.
I live very close to the site where Toll Brothers, the developers that have come in, want to build their huge luxury condos. And my first concern, actually, before even the canal, was what's going to be released into the air when they knock down that warehouse, because I know that underneath that ground are years and years of toxins. And I've done all this research, the heavy metals, the plumes. As I learned more about what they wanted to do, I heard that they didn't really think the canal was that dirty, and I couldn't believe that they were actually going to try and sell luxury condos to people on a filthy, polluted canal.
Yeah, the Toll Brothers are a large, maybe the largest luxury suburban home builders in the country. But they also have branched out into urban areas. They have something new to come online here. I hope that they don't do it. I hope they redesign their plan. I'm not against development, all the development on the canal area. If you can clean up the canal, beautiful in context housing would be wonderful. even down by the canal. It'd be beautiful to look out your window and see, well, not this, but see something that is not only healthy but also attractive.
Yeah, as I said at the outset, there's many ways of getting something done. I think I used a worse phrase than that about cats, but I don't want to suggest that you can't do this in multiple ways. There are many different ways you can do things. Our concern is that the more complex an already very complicated matter becomes, the more likely it is to be fragile or brittle or susceptible to some kind of failure along the way. Not saying it can't be done. I just think that if you start out with one process and use that process all the way through, you're likely to get to the end line, to the goal line, a little faster, a little bit more efficiently than if you have these multiple moving parts. Kaz and Dan shared this flow chart with us on, I think, a meeting on Thursday evening. Certainly interested. We certainly want to understand more about it. We're not about to pull any trigger. We're still in the middle of a public comment process. We want to hear from lots of people. We want to hear from anybody who's got a point of view, what the observations are. But my response to Kaz last Thursday evening was, there's a lot of moving parts here. And this is a complicated process that you're proposing. It's already a complicated situation. I'm a little concerned about the complexity of the process.
Next question is from Bob Zuckerman, our environmental chair.
Thanks, Richard. This question is for Kaz and the city, but Walter, I would like you to address this too. Kaz, maybe I missed something, which is entirely possible. But what exactly are these incentives that you're talking about for partners, potentially responsible partners, to voluntarily come to the table for millions of dollars, or in some cases tens of millions of dollars, to clean up their sites? What exactly is that incentive?
The city has a nerve saying that, first of all, the city tried to rezone this for overdevelopment. And how do you get away with rezoning for redevelopment? How do you get away with rezoning a toxic waterway? How do you do that? And toxic land?
I take the city at their word that they believe that some of the redevelopment would be, and reinvestment would be accelerated in their judgment if the site is not put on the Superfund list, or said the other way around, that they are concerned that some of the investment would flee from the area if the site were put on the Superfund list. I don't think there's that much of a difference between us having proposed it for Superfund listing and making the final listing, but I'm not a real estate expert, so that may be the case. I've said, listen, you have this brownfields office that was just set up. You got a lot of brownfields around the city. I presume that your goal is to try and get as many of them as cleaned up as possible. Just a word to the wise, if you invest all this time and energy in the Gowanus Canal program, you're going to have, by definition again, less opportunity, less time to invest to the other brownfield sites around the rest of the city. So make sure that as you go down this pathway that you really have your eyes open as to what's going to be involved, because this will be very, very time consuming and will require a lot of your attention from your professional staff.
The way the EPA has explained Superfund is funded is the pollutants are held accountable for their contaminants. The key span, who is one of the primary contaminants from the coal gasification site, are backing Superfund. If it goes with it, they're totally on board. We have to bring all the other polluters into the mix also to help cover the funding. Superfund will be funded through the federal government, and that money recouped from the polluters.
Superfund was just by Congress given $400 million for current projects. So this notion that Superfund is broke and there's no money, I mean, we're in an Obama administration now, and this is really something high on his priority list, the environment. As far as it taking a long time, you know, people say, oh, it's going to take a long time. Yeah, you know what? We're talking about hundreds of years that it took to have this pollution. It's going to take time because they're going to have to do steps to remediate it. They have to assess it. They have to create a plan. They have to remediate it. It will take time. But what's the alternative? Just covering it up with some dirt?
Well, also, the city has taken the first move to add to the delays by adding an extra 30 days to the comment period. That's the first of the delay tactics I think the city is doing to try to stop this process. We understand that under the city's alternative planning process, they have to get everybody, all the pollutants, to voluntarily step forward and participate. And if one of those guys step out, then you're entering into a court system that could drag it on for far longer than if it were being supervised by the EPA. That the alternative probably is going to set up a situation that runs much longer in time span to address the issues than if it were addressed through the procedures that are already established under EPA.
We're curious what you're doing here today and what's in the Gowanus.
Yeah, you know, we've got these little litmus papers, so we're trying to see what exactly is in the Gowanus Canal.
So we're doing a litmus test of actual Gowanus Canal water?
Yes. This was taken fresh today.
Fresh today?
Yes.
Alright. So we just dip it on in here?
You can, or you can take a little dropper if you wish to be more scientific.
Alright, let's be more scientific. So I put this down? Alright. So this is, how scientific is this?
Very scientific.
So we've got guns, syphilis, scurvy, anaerobes, drowned rat, love, bag o' shit, cadmium, chloroform, houseboats, chicken bones, and oysters. Okay. All right.
Science, that's probably good.
We'll see.
If you wish to have more science, there is an actual scientific bus over there where they have real microscopic images of what's in the Gowanus.
I'm going to check that out. Thank you.
Totally.
Welcome to the BioBus. We are a fully functioning biology lab on wheels, and we go to schools throughout the city, working with students looking at microscopic life under the microscopes. And all of our microscopes and computers on board are powered by electricity, which is generated from solar panels on the roof, and a wind turbine, which you can see with your camera right there. So that makes the electricity that powers our microscopes and computers. And the bus itself has a diesel engine that we run on vegetable oil. We have a relationship with a taqueria in the Bronx, and once a week we get 5 gallons of vegetable oil that we use to power our bus, and that's how our bus drives through the city. So we are really a biobus. You're welcome to come inside.
We heard you guys are taking samples of Gowanus Canal water. Is that true?
We were trying to take samples of the Gowanus Canal water. So far today, we haven't found any microorganisms in those samples. So we've been entertaining ourselves by looking at samples from rainwater puddles.
We'd be curious to see what you see under a microscope from the Gowanus Canal.
Well, if you hang on about a minute, Ben is making some samples now.
Excellent.
My name is Ben Dubin-Thaler, also known as Dr. Ben. I founded the BioBus 2 years ago as a project to bring science education to underprivileged students. The BioBus travels to schools, spending from a couple of days to a week at a given school. Students come from the school onto the bus and get to use our microscopes, take pictures and movies of cells crawling around, and then they get to use our computer lounge to analyze those images and post them to the internet where they can share them with their friends and continue to think about biology. The point of the project is to provide scientific opportunities to students who wouldn't otherwise have scientific encouragement as well as role models.
Do you live on the bus?
No, we do not. We have apartments just like everybody else in the city. But we spend a lot of time on the bus.
This is water from the Gowanus, from a pretty stagnant part, actually, underneath a rock. And if we don't find anything there, I'm going to be a little bit concerned, at the very least confused. We'll definitely see a lot of dirt in there, whether it's fecal matter from humans or fish or other organisms, will be a little difficult to discern on the microscope.
Ben has his PhD from Columbia. He got his degree 2 years ago. And I believe he studied cell motors, so how cells move.
The puddle water sample, comparing the puddle water sample with the Gowanus Canal sample.
Dr. Ben, who formed this 2 years ago. And it's a independent organization.
Okay, so good signs. There are some bacteria in here. It's not a real concentrated sample. But we can see some bacteria, like one that just swam by here. There's one.
So all of what we're looking at is dirt right now.
Can I look at it? You have to explain it.
Exactly. We have very little data at the moment, but so far we're building a picture of the Gowanus as being somewhat bleak.
What about heavy metals and industrial waste? Can you see any of that when you look at a microscopic slide?
We can't see the compounds themselves. They're much too small to be able to see on any light microscope. We do have very powerful microscopes on the BioBus, however. In order to see those kinds of molecules, you need to form either crystals of them so that there's larger amounts together, or you need to do a chemical analysis, which we're not set up to do.
What are we looking on here? Are they anaerobes?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know?
Yeah.
You have to analyze the bubbles or something.
Well,
we can look at pH. pH will determine the oxygen. Well, is an indicator of the oxygen carbon dioxide ratio.
Should we go check it out? Yeah. We're checking out the pH. This is actually not from the Gowanus directly. This is actually from that puddle right there. Oh. So what we're interested in doing is actually comparing the pH of the puddle to what you found in the Gowanus. Oh, we have a dropper. Excellent.
Does look a little green there.
Looks like we're at about pH 6, which is pretty acidic. Was this a recent sample?
Yes.
From the Gowanus?
Yeah, all of these are actually.
So on the left, we have water from the puddle, and on the right, we have water from the canal. I would say that the water from the puddle is closer to pH 7, and the water from the canal is actually more acidic, closer to 6. We are located at biobus.org, biobus.org. Check us out. We have public events all through the summer, and we'd love to see you there.
This year we have gotten asked by the state of New York to look at the Gowanus Canal, and for that matter to also look at Newtown Creek. Gowanus Canal is a little earlier, or a little ahead of the Newtown Creek in the evaluation process. But I think people more and more are realizing in the first generation of Superfund sites there was a lot of focus on the Love Canal type dump sites. The second or third generation of Superfund, people are beginning to realize that we've also contaminated our waterways, and the mud is a real serious concern. The sediments are a serious concern, so we're trying to now figure out what are the best ways to manage that. Sediments have to be dewatered first. You have to squeeze the water out. You have to treat that water before you discharge it. You have to then take the dried mud and send it to a secure hazardous waste disposal facility where it can get properly managed and monitored for effectively the rest of time. You can try to decontaminate it. That is a complicated chemical process or a thermal process, which will actually, in some ways, remove the contamination, or a washing process that will remove the contaminants from the sediments. Pretty complicated technically, pretty expensive, and you need a facility to do it.
The Clean Water Act was passed in 1972. That's more than 3 decades the City of New York has had to address the conditions in the Gowanus Canal. Mayor Bloomberg has had 8 of those years. And so far, the only thing that has changed is they've changed the rope for catching the sewage at the top of the canal. Yeah, they're supposed to start a cleanup plan sometime this year, but to date, they have not moved anywhere forward to cleaning up the canal.
The strongest lobbying body in New York is the real estate lobby, and they have Mayor Bloomberg's ears. And you know what? I can't believe Mayor Bloomberg is campaigning right now, and I'm seeing ads of him going on roofs in Brooklyn and saying, you know what I see when I look on these roofs? I see opportunity for green, you know. If he wants to be the green mayor, if he wants to plant 1 million trees, why doesn't he want to finally comprehensively clean up this canal?
What about the effect of global warming? The mayor himself has issued a statement that tides are going to get higher, there's going to be more flooding, the city should be prepared for that. Why is he so in a hurry to build on the shores of the Gowanus Canal that already is experiencing heavy flooding?
The canal is in something called the 100-year flood zone. That means that there is a map somewhere used by insurance companies and by city emergency and federal emergency management organizations that says that this area, this little cloud that's on this map, is expected to be flooded underwater under certain conditions that hopefully only occur once every 100 years, but in fact, since we are experiencing much heavier and greater degrees of rain and rainfalls now than we have in the past, and since everything is being measured by 1988 standards where we are surpassing that rainfall every year since 1988 by at least 20%, we can expect a lot of flooding. People who live around here are having the flood parts of their insurance canceled.
When there are heavy rains of any or really torrential rains or a lot of rain over a long period of time, water from the canal, and there's high tide, water from the canal will come up to that area, right there. Right. How the Toll Brothers are going to build on an area that is not only a floodplain, but an area that has in the past year or two has demonstrated that it's a floodplain is beyond me. The Toll Brothers are considering putting a garage into the Gowanus Canal, which would take that much more space away for rainwater to be drained into the canal. It's going to keep on backing up.
Come down and take a look, see just how much space there is that divides what is underwater now from what could be underwater during a bad rainstorm.
This is a beautiful, wonderful neighborhood with lots of open space, as you can see in the background, but it's not clean and it's not healthy. And this is serious stuff. This cannot be ignored. It cannot be neglected. It cannot be abused any further. To receive a gift from the federal EPA like this is just too good to give up. And we need their help, and this would do it. And no matter how long it takes, if it takes, a year, 10 years, who cares? As long as we get better results than we have now.
Sign a petition that's going out to our local politicians to let them know that the community cares about this, and we have a voice too.
Send a message to the EPA telling why you think this site and sites like this should be cleaned up.
So please go superfundgowanus.org now, before July 8th for sure, because July 8th is the end of the comment period. Go there and do two things. Go there and link to the EPA site, and you don't have to say a lot. You can say as much or as little as you want. You can also, send attachments, photos. Make it personal if you have anything personal to say. The other thing below that is a link to the petition. There you just add your name. Just please go to that site. Help us. Thank you.
To quote Margaret Mead, "Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has."
There was a lot of industry here, and this is a lot of its landfill, and we don't even know what the substances in the landfill are. To this day, nobody's done a health study here. Nobody's really done any intensive upland soil testing. The Army Corps has done water research and water testing, so there are statistics for that. But as far as the industry goes, there was 150 years worth of tanneries, ice houses, ink factories, dye factories. Coal was the worst. Coal manufacturing, gasification plants, and we're still seeing the remnants of these old industries here, and it's time to get cleaned up.
In Love Canal, there was a dump site in the middle of what became a residential community. It hadn't been one. The contamination was, the hazardous contaminants were put into the former canal and then covered over. So they were underground, they were totally enclosed. They ended up migrating into the groundwater and moving sideways so that they became underneath the residential communities. Then, in a couple of very wet years during the late 1970s, the water table rose and the contamination rose with it and ended up coming into people's backyards, into their cellars and things of that sort. So the contamination was literally in their backyards and in their homes.
Another issue that floats through all of this, excuse the metaphor, which was not intended, is that a few years ago, there was a storm surge in New Orleans that caused tremendous amount of damage. In this particular case, we've heard from both the city and the federal government that there are sediments at the bottom of the canal that, if disturbed, could be very toxic in parts of 4.5% as opposed to parts per million or billion. And so one of the questions that we've asked for a number of years now is, could someone please model for us storm surges at different levels and let us know exactly how bad a disaster we might expect until all of this is cleaned up? Because regardless of whether it's the city's approach or the federal approach, there's going to be a period of time where we're at risks. And no one has mentioned building levees or anything else to deal with the issue of keeping the Gowanus from overflowing its banks, disturbing the sediment, and depositing that up on existing housing or future housing. So we'd like everyone to come back and talk to us about that subject, and sooner rather than later.
We understand that under the city's alternative planning process, they have to get everybody, all the pollutants, to voluntarily step forward and participate. And if one of those guys step out, then you're entering into a court system that could drag it on for far longer than if it were being supervised by the EPA. That the alternative probably is going to set up a situation that runs much longer in time span to address the issues than if it were addressed through the procedures that are already established under EPA. The other thing we keep hearing from the people opposing Superfund is that there are no health issues. I think the Toll Brothers released in their press release that there are no health risks being around this canal. And we asked what that's based on because there have been no health studies of people living in and around the area.
This is a sick canal. It needs to be treated, it needs to be cleaned. But it also doesn't need 12-story buildings blocking out all sunlight.
I think that people who don't live locally and not part of our community should realize that a properly functioning estuary serves our entire biosphere in mitigating CO2 levels. We have a dead estuary here. If the Army Corps could go forward, as they have already been charged to restore this to a functioning estuary, it would benefit more than just our local community, but the broader community of New York and also the Earth and our biosphere.
What a gift, the EPA. They have experience with this. They have the procedures. They know how to do this. They come here and they want to work. The other thing is they say they want to work with the community. They want to work with anybody to do this, this cleanups. Let's not tie their hands. They need community support. They need support to do this, and let's give it to them.
We are in the midst of a 90-day comment period with the EPA ending July 8th. Go to superfundgowanus.org. We want everyone to make comments on the EPA site, telling personal stories, adding photographs, or just saying, I want the canal cleaned up. You don't have to live in the Gowanus area to do this.
I wouldn't be on that canoe.